Good afternoon, everyone. Just watching everybody's come and join us. Thank you for being with us on what is a fairly rainy Thursday in Cornwall. I have to say, I've no idea what it's like in the rest of the country, but it was nice when I woke up and then the heavens opened. So this is the best place to be. Where else are you going to go? You're not going for a lunchtime stroll on a day like this. We are here for the wonderful AMS and Rolls-Royce webinar. We're going to be chatting about the Rolls-Royce's transformation of its early careers recruitment strategy. Who doesn't love a good transformation? I'm guessing you've been hard at work and everybody will really enjoy hearing what it is that you're up to there. So numbers are ticking up, but we will make a start very shortly. I'm going to make a plea for everyone to please put your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. It'll just make it a lot easier for us all towards the end of the session. I'm going to hand over to Lauren now for Lauren to do your own introduction and everybody else's too, and I'll join back at the end just to help navigate those Q&As for you. So over to you, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Big welcome. So my name is Lauren Cunningham, and I'm a Global Early Careers Client Director at AMS. I'm really delighted to be hosting today's webinar alongside two close long-term colleagues, Ellie and Claudia. We've worked together for many years, and we love to come out and talk about the latest, particularly to hear from Ellie on the latest iteration or transformation phase of her emerging talent strategy. And as Sarah said today, we are going to be talking about the latest changes at Rolls-Royce and their emerging talent strategy, but really specifically focusing on how the changes that have been made to sort of help future-proof Rolls-Royce's global workforce through a skills-first emerging talent approach. There's been a lot of change. It's quite an ambitious program of global change that Claudia has been very involved in. So we thought it'd be great to have both of them come and speak to us today. So that's what we're going to talk about over the next hour, but we will leave time at the end for Sarah to come back on and answer any questions that you might have and that we can get to. What we really want to focus on is hearing from Ellie and Claudia, like what specifically have they changed to move to a skills-first approach? What are the big learnings? What has been a challenge, a learning along the way, and really what's working and what's next? So we hope that everyone on the call, whether you're from, wherever you're from, or wherever you are on your journey or your interaction with this big skills evolution that we're all on, we really hope you all get something out of it and enjoy the next hour. Just really kind of as a quick introduction, I think for many of us and the way that we see Rolls-Royce as across the globe is really a driver for innovation in engineering. And that is what I love about working with Rolls-Royce, is that you can really see that spirit of innovation through the way that the emerging talent strategy is constantly evolving, really pushing the boundaries to truly kind of open up more opportunities for early talent, to broaden the idea of what early talent is, and then ultimately to be focusing whilst doing that on how to meet the future needs of the business. So it's been fascinating seeing how the strategy has evolved over the past kind of 5+ years. Many of us know as well, like we have a real problem with the projections for the types of skilled workers that we need. I think there's a projected shortage of 2.6 million skilled workers in the UK alone in the next 10 years. And there's other similar global trends that Rolls-Royce and Ellie are really paying attention to, and they're one of the drivers. We're going to hear more from Ellie in a bit on some of the drivers in terms of why they're reshaping how emerging talent is assessed, how it's developed, and then ultimately how it's retained through this kind of new skills-first approach. So with no further ado, we're joined today by Ellie Long, who is the Global Head of Emerging Talent at Rolls-Royce, the driver of these strategic changes and the global vision for emerging talent. And Claudia Nutchkins, who is our Global Head of Assessment Consulting at AMS. And Claudia and her team have played a really key role for many years, and in this change as well, and sort of rethinking, redesigning how that sort of future potential is measured. So for today's call, I'm going to start with Ellie. I thought I'd kind of do it in two halves, talk to Ellie, talk to Claudia, but guys, please, jump in wherever. We don't have to be too structured about it. Yeah, let's get started. Right, so Ellie, I'll finally let you speak. Right, so Rolls-Royce, as we know, as we've said, you're making this major shift, right, from traditional early career hiring to this more skills-based kind of potential-led approach. So can you just start off by telling us a bit like what has prompted this and kind of why do you feel like now is the right time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess there's probably kind of two things at play here. So for those that kind of, I guess, look externally at some of the research that's happening, and we've been talking about this for a while now, but there's this kind of concept of, I guess, a population pyramid that's happening across most of the markets that we operate in. So essentially, there's not enough talent coming through the traditional early career routes to meet the needs that we're going to have as an employer. I use one example in the US, the population age of over kind of 65 is now suppressing those that are kind of in your school leaver, school kind of group audience. And so we're seeing a real kind of shift in terms of how people are working, their working patterns, what that looks like, and therefore the talent that we need to kind of tap into, or I guess how we manage that talent. And then I think internally we've kind of reflected and we've looked and we know that we've got some really clear future skills gaps. We're getting better at seeing what those future skills gaps are and how they link to where we've kind of got core capability growth and what that kind of means for us as an organisation. And so our shift in emerging talent is, yes, partly in reaction to what's happening in the external market, but also, I guess, the pressures of us really needing to use emerging talent as a critical lever for upgrading those skills within Rolls-Royce and really kind of driving, I guess, the future workforce capabilities that we want to have. And so emerging talent isn't just a name change. We talk about transformation at Rolls-Royce kind of not just being kind of like small iterative changes. It's actually when you're doing something significant, it's not just rebadging or renaming something or kind of polishing around the edges. And so essentially emerging talent is about how do we tap into a breadth of skills talent, focusing on potential future behaviours, the future skills and core capabilities that we want integrated into our kind of enterprise talent system, and attracting from a kind of really diverse audience, not just in the traditional sense, but actually in the exit point of people leaving either university or school, and the types of grades and qualifications people have got and the types of experiences they've got. So it absolutely encompasses our traditional kind of early career audiences of graduates and apprentices and interns and work experience. But it also has got a broader kind of reach around kind of career changes, internal talent, those that are kind of seen as high performance, high potential. What are we doing with people that have maybe are really looking to shift careers but have got transferable skills, those that have maybe been out of the workplace. I kind of use the example of maybe people that have left school and started a family young and now want to develop a career but don't necessarily have the right grades or qualifications. And so emerging talent is broad, is very holistic, but it's about using talent in a way to drive forward our kind of future workforce capability upgrade, both in relation to what Rolls-Royce needs to drive, but also the industry and sector that we're in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's obviously, like you said, it's a huge change. There's so much kind of built into this, all focused on that kind of future workforce planning, which we know is hard enough, right? So I think it's really been fascinating watching how you've gone about doing that. Can you just, can you talk a little bit about kind of how you're embedding that thinking across the business? Because you're looking globally, you've got lots of different business units, you've got a huge, variety of stakeholders, already loads of solid programs that are working really well. So how are you kind of embedding this thinking that this is the right approach?
I guess so within our strategy around emerging talent, we've got something that we call philosophies. So these are kind of essentially our new ways of working that we've kind of embedded. And I think a key part of those philosophies is where, and I candidly use the phrase, where the power dynamic sits. But traditionally we've been very kind of BAU operational delivery for Rolls-Royce. So we've kind of been seen as actually working in partnership with the business or kind of being receivers of the requests, the demands of the business to be able to drive early careers forward. And within emerging talent, actually that's shifted. It's about an enterprise delivery model. So it's about us looking across the whole of Rolls-Royce globally understanding what it is that we want to deliver, and what are the enterprise skills. We kind of talk about it them as Rolls-Royce skills rather than kind of very specific divisional or role-based skills. And it is a mindset shift. It is a kind of a cultural shift that we've had to kind of drive through emerging talent, and we're not there yet. It will take time. But I think through using different language and through setting up our different governance frameworks, having those philosophies, being really clear on actually what we stand for and what the purpose is and what we're trying to drive, we are making that change. And I look really simply at what we would have traditionally called demand planning. When I first joined Rolls-Royce, we would go out to the organisation, you'd say, right, well, tell us what your demand is for early career, how many do you want, what does that look like, when do you want them, and what programmes do you want to deliver. And we don't do demand planning anymore, we do supply planning. And essentially we supply the organisation with the skills that they need for the future. So it's about shifting the conversation to say, as an enterprise, what are the future skills that you need, what are the long-term skills that you want to build through emerging talent as a kind of a key lever, and then we develop that supply plan and we supply the organization with the talent that they want. So I think it's shifting the conversation, and it is a cultural change. It's not just simply kind of going, oh, we're going to deliver work differently. It's really changing, I guess, the culture of talent and how emerging talent is seen and viewed and delivered across the enterprise.
And I think that's been part of the journey, because we worked together for a long time, and I think it'd be hard to just kind of start right here. You definitely gained the trust of the business through your programs are always evolving. Like, you're creating new apprenticeships, you're changing how the graduate program is structured to, you know, meet different business needs. So I think they can see that these changes, which sometimes are big and bold, can produce great results, are agile, you're constantly tweaking them. But I have to say, like, obviously we work with many different organizations across different industries, and the sort of shift from demand to supply has definitely, for us as kind of client directors within early careers, where, you know, everyone's fascinated by this, and it's bold and it's working. So we're definitely doing something right. So I think we're going into season 2 now, aren't we, of supply?
Yes, yeah. And this year, hopefully, I don't want to speak too soon because we're literally in the thick of it, but the plan is that this year's supply will be for the next 5 years. So what we kind of talk about within those philosophies is emerging talent is a long-term lever. It's not about being reactive and saying, oh, quickly, I need to develop some skills, because even if we go back to our core kind of bread and butter programs, an apprentice that we're talking about for 2026 is not going to come out the oven, as one of my team would say, until 2030. And so this is a long-term capability skill build. It's not about, oh, well, I've got a short-term skills gap that I need to fix now. That's a different lever within our kind of enterprise talent model. So what we're saying is we shouldn't be turning programs on and off. We should be iterating the design of those programs and making sure they're still fit for purpose, but the supply of talent should be set. And so essentially the numbers that we confirm for this year will be fixed and flat for the next 5 years, with the opportunity each year to iterate and evolve them depending on what the business kind of looks like and the way that work is being set and what work we have coming in. But yeah, it shouldn't be every single year, or gosh, what programs do we want to run and what does that look like, and let's go and ask everybody. Really, we're the strategic experts, and so I guess that's where it sits. And I think one of the other changes that's really helped in that space is, as part of setting up emerging talent, we look after it from an end-to-end kind of delivery perspective. So again, it sounds like a really common sense thing to do, but quite traditionally, and Rolls-Royce was the same 3 or 4 years ago, your delivery teams picked up TA activity over there, and learning might have picked up bits of the program design, and then you had an apprenticeship team, and then you had governance, and reward was done, and it was all very disjointed. It's now one end-to-end delivery team, and so both me and my first line all have end-to-end delivery and accountability for the different parts of the model, different regions, but actually their roles look after the whole lifespan of an individual. And I think, again, when we talk about supply, or we talk about understanding what we want to bring in from a skills perspective, you've got someone thinking about that not just from a TA lens, but from a, okay, well, I've got to go and build relationships with universities, or I've got to recruit them, and then I've got to onboard them, and then I've got to develop them, and then I've got to ensure the curriculum of learning looks like right, or whatever that kind of is, and then we've got to offboard them into the organisation. So we're having that as a joined up conversation.
That makes so much sense, actually. We haven't really spoken about this specifically. I can see how the two going hand in hand, this shift with that shift, he's overlooking the whole thing. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, makes perfect sense. You mentioned the programs a second ago, and
Yeah.
also there are some really new, exciting programs that you've introduced alongside this shift. I would love to hear a little bit just like about some of those programs. And what have been kind of your biggest learnings when you're designing a program focused purely on future skills?
Yeah, so I guess probably the biggest, boldest one we've launched in the past kind of year is what we've called our Enterprise Skills Accelerator. So we've discontinued all of our business graduate programs in the UK for 2025 and globally for 2026. And we are replacing them, or we're putting in the Enterprise Skills Accelerator. And I kind of use the language strategically there, because this wasn't about us rebranding or redesigning our business programs. It was about us actually drawing a line and saying, do you know what, we need to do something different, and that's what the Enterprise Skills Accelerator is going to drive. So the idea of the program is that it is disruptive in experience and design. So it's an agile business program that targets graduates still, but really looks at driving our future business skills at pace. And I think my reflections are that, again, what we've not done is kind of gone, okay, well, we need to do something different with our business graduate programs. Let's maybe call it something different, and let's look at the rotations or look at the placements. It's been blank sheet of paper designed, and we've not designed a graduate scheme. And there was some deliberate intent behind that. But it's a shorter program. It's not rotational in the traditional sense of you're going to go and complete 4 placements. It involves different business simulation activities. It's kind of built around the concept of learning, unlearning, and relearning. So how do we develop actually future skills like curiosity? How do we develop learning agility? How do we develop kind of broad scale commercial acumen, so someone really understands how a business like Rolls-Royce operates and runs? How do we develop some of our leadership expectations and capabilities, all underpinned by then kind of self-directed study and a professional qualification? And so my reflection, if I think as we go into some of the other program redesign work or kind of new design work that we'll be doing later this year, is actually, if it doesn't feel intentional and it doesn't feel uncomfortable, you're probably not redesigning or designing the thing that you want to do. You're kind of probably polishing the edges of something. So yeah, if it doesn't feel slightly rogue, it's probably not going to deliver the kind of, I guess, the bold transformation that you want it to deliver. So I'm not going to lie, we don't know 100% whether it's going to work or not, but the design again has allowed it to be kind of iterative and evolve as we go as well, and as we kind of move at pace and as the organisation develops and changes. So we've got fantastic talent joining us on the programme. I'm really confident about the kind of the individuals that we've got coming in, and what we'll be doing is we'll be seeing how that programme kind of works, and we'll be iterating it over the next kind of 12 months. And it might be that the version that we roll out in the US looks completely different, because in a year's time what we need in the US is completely different, but that's what the programme framework is kind of, I guess, kind of there. So I don't have, I guess, a proven blueprint like you might do if you were setting up a new apprenticeship program, but we know that we need to deliver skills that we're currently not delivering through traditional early career, if you think about it in its old sense, programs. So we want to create things like social influence. We talk about kind of creative thinking, curiosity, learning agility, motivation, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we've had to be bold and do something different, and ask me this time next year whether it's worked or not.
Great. It will. And that's the thing, is that how you measure it. It takes years, right, to really see the impact.
Yeah.
But the candidates are absolutely fantastic. There's been a really, really, really great response in the market in terms
of there has, yeah.
Really, really good, which is fantastic. So we've talked a little bit about how you've taken the business on the journey, etc. But it's a big shift. I think this is a good one to kind of dive into a little bit, when you just look like you've gotten rid of the business programs and then you're moving into the new ESA program. In that specific example, like, how did you take the business along with you? How did you convince them? I'm sure there's a lot of emotion that stakeholders stay within Rolls-Royce for many years. They've run these programs for a long time. How did you do that? And how did you kind of what resistance did you get? How did you overcome it? We'd be fascinating to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I am very lucky that I think at Rolls-Royce, the kind of SME directors that I work with from a kind of talent or kind of a learning perspective are very supportive, and our CEO is very behind kind of transformation and driving kind of bold change at pace. So from a very senior kind of top leadership buy-in perspective, this links to the change in our strategy and the change in our kind of people deal. So that buy-in's probably, I guess, not been as hard, and they're a really good audience to test and kind of bounce stuff off. But absolutely, yes, there has been resistance kind of across Rolls-Royce from a leader and a stakeholder perspective, but also from some of our graduates and interns, because they don't quite necessarily get what we're trying to achieve. So you've got interns that might have been looking to come back onto a traditional graduate program saying, well, I really wanted to work in marketing, so how do I do that? Actually, this is about developing, this is not about developing kind of traditional functional graduate programs that drive a certain career path. And so we're having to do a lot more education, I think, around what skills mean and what a skills-based organization is, and why skills are going to kind of become that new currency in the marketplace. And so therefore, how do we build sustainable talent programs and sustainable talent solutions around that? It sounds very simple, but I think market benchmarking and data and kind of holding the mirror up to some of those difficult stakeholders has been really key. So it's about telling that story against the organizational strategy. So how I linked that, I guess, into what Rolls-Royce called Rolls-Royce Winning Together, our kind of one Rolls-Royce enterprise strategy, that it's kind of been delivered, actually using that as the pillars, because if you can clearly articulate how it's going to deliver what your future business intentions are, and what your kind of future business strategic priorities are, that again changes the kind of the story and the norm. And I think that also then gives you your purpose of why are you doing emerging talent or early career, whatever you're kind of calling it. And for some companies, I completely appreciate that if you're different size organization, it might be about actually early career is our route to mass hiring and bringing in a steady flow of entry talent roles, and actually that's what we want to continue doing, and that's okay. I think it's then accepting that's going to give you a very different ROI. Actually, if emerging talent is a strategic lever for driving future skills, you want to build wider talent pools, and building leadership capability, workforce capability upgrade is what we talk a lot about at Rolls-Royce. You've got to transform how you do that and how you view and see early career and emerging talent. And using that external market kind of data and benchmarking, talking about things like aging workforce, where you're going to tap into talent, that, I guess, positioning that as the context that you're operating against, to those leaders, is then how you're going to start to, I guess, drive the change. And we've also done quite a lot of unpicking, I guess, with the next generation coming through, and it's interesting because they are starting to think about skills, and they do kind of almost like want something from an organization. So I kind of talk about, even if they go through your assessment process, they kind of want to leave having learned something about themselves. So how do we build and design things around skills? Because they are starting to kind of recognize, actually, they go to a company to do a role, to do tasks. They don't necessarily look at things like jobs for life, or job security, or focusing on wanting to do a very specific job. And that's what your traditional graduate or apprenticeship program would have driven. So again, it's kind of linking into, I guess, the motivations of the individuals that you've got coming through.
Yeah, I was going to.
I've certainly not cracked it though. I don't want everyone sitting here thinking that all of a sudden everyone at Rolls-Royce is like all on the same page and it's super. I'm making it paint a picture like we've got it perfect. We haven't. There's still a lot of work to do. But yeah.
I was going to reinforce what you were saying, Ellie, having sort of supported you for the last few years, or my team has certainly been very involved, is that one of the things about your stakeholders and your hiring population is they're particularly inclined to listen to logic.
Yes.
That's just the very nature of what Rolls-Royce does. They are both incredibly invested in what you do. They want to understand the rationale really clearly. And if you give them a good reason for doing things, they're pretty logical thinkers, a lot of them, which is very refreshing. And we also know that does not exist in a lot of clients. So I think the tactics that you have to employ varies quite a lot with the stakeholder, the nature of the stakeholder. But we have just found them, once we've got used to you as a stakeholder group, we found it very refreshing, but challenging to come up with justification for every change you make. It's really good.
And they are engineers by trade, so data is their data evidence is their bread and butter. And I'm a gut feel, it feels like the right thing to do, ask for forgiveness not permission type person. So we've had to find a happy middle ground at Rolls-Royce. But I think it's about understanding how you best influence your stakeholders within your organization, and yeah, you guys listening will know your audience is best on how you do that. But yeah, taking them on that journey and working out, I think, what is the purpose of early career and emerging talent, why are you doing it, and we're doing it because we've got to change our capability and skills upgrade. So what's the data and the story that we can tell around that?
But you're right, and it hasn't. I think the other thing, if we haven't really talked about too much, which is, but I've found it really exciting for you, but also I think a bit daunting that you're really emerging talent's kind of the first to really kind of take this step for the Rolls-Royce vision and to make tangible changes. So it's not like you're going into a business that's already also fully on this journey recruiting. Is because I think that it's a logical place to start, I think, in a lot of ways. But yeah, you kind of had to go out there and fly that flag in a whole new way. So yeah, it's definitely not been easy, but that hasn't put you off, which is great. I think the other thing, one of my kind of, before I move on to Claudia, this is very, you also oversee early careers or emerging talent globally. We all know, many of us on the call, that every region brings different challenges. It can be a totally different very different working culture, obviously a different geographical culture. Where are you on that journey? So like, it'd be great to, where's Germany coming in, and when about the US, and what are your kind of considerations for how you might, like, what's next? How are you going to adjust the strategy? Any kind of thoughts on the global expansion? So I'm sure many people will be thinking, it's obviously a lot of us are based in the UK, and we might just be operating in the UK, but it feels more and more early careers programs are more global or trying to be more global. And you're fairly far along on that journey, but it's challenging.
Yeah, I think the messaging and tone and kind of cultural shift, I've not actually found from a global perspective it's differed that much. Actually, positioning what emerging talent is for, we kind of have global kind of recognition that we're all in agreement. I mean, the types of skills we might want to bring in different regions is probably very different. Our operational sizes in different regions therefore drive, again, different types of, whether it might be quite a engineering heavy focused region, depending on what kind of Rolls-Royce is doing there, might kind of lean differently to the types of programs or opportunities. But as a whole, I've actually found there's been quite general consensus, and quite general consensus around the fact that we really want to focus on building things like work readiness, and coming at this from a perspective of we are on the whole still dealing with young people, even if they're kind of a career changer. We're kind of seeing them maybe in their late 20s, or they've done a degree and now really want to do something different, and therefore that wraparound support and that kind of career readiness piece, again, there's kind of global consensus around what that looks like. I think it's then been about I'm spending a lot of time visiting some of these locations and unpicking, and I do think there is, post-COVID, there is now great value in trying to do some of this face-to-face and working with stakeholders and understanding what's kind of going on in their operations. But our whole team is, again, designed around how do we start from a global position or a standpoint. So I think we've been quite guilty in the past of going, well, Rolls-Royce is biggest regions in the UK, so let's design something in the UK and try and lift and shift it. And that doesn't work. So what we're doing now is going, let's design something for Rolls-Royce as an enterprise. What is our enterprise framework or our enterprise skills, or what is even our enterprise induction experience want to look and feel like? What are those moments that matter that we want to kind of implement into something, no matter where you are? You're an emerging talent person at Rolls-Royce, and therefore you should have the same experience. And then we tweak for the regions. So you take that global framework and then you shift or you embed it slightly differently depending on what the kind of the landscape looks like. And we're seeing that start to have more success. We're doing some work around our engineering graduate program at the moment, and I think just bringing global stakeholders in to have that enterprise conversation to start off with is very different, again, to how Rolls-Royce would have operated beforehand. It probably would have been a program that would have been designed by some engineers in the UK, and then we would have tried to have slotted it into something in the US, and it just wouldn't have worked because the landscape's different, the skills gaps are different, the audiences are different. And so yeah, I think that's a big one. I think the other opportunity where we've got something to do something on a global scale, and for those that know me know that social mobility is a really kind of key topic and something that's very close to my heart. But I think one of the biggest challenges we still face is kind of access into our opportunities. And again, we see this no matter what kind of region we go into. How do we focus more on upskilling and reskilling pre someone joining us, and working with with initially we're kind of focusing on the student audience, but actually growing that into kind of career changes or wider groups and populations, and understanding actually how what that looks like, and again on a global scale for Rolls-Royce. So we're kind of taking a bit of a step back, and without giving too much away around what's coming later in the year, working with young people to help them understand what skills look like and what skills means at Rolls-Royce, and what is a skills taxonomy, and how are they going to use skills as currency, and how do we bridge that gap between school and kind of technical education with Rolls-Royce. So that's a big kind of hopefully global activity that will be happening on our kind of roadmap later this year.
That'll be our next webinar next year.
Yes.
Yeah, exciting. It's some exciting stuff. Brilliant. Right. Thank you so much, Ellie. And of course, keep joining in on the conversation.
Yes, no, I will.
Yes, of course. To Claudia. So Claudia, obviously your team, like you said before, really central to supporting Ellie through kind of regular redesign and adjustment of the assessment framework and assessment materials, assessment strategy at Rolls-Royce. So how have you approached this iteration? I know everyone was excited when Ellie came to us however long ago about the shift to skills. So how have you approached it, and what kind of makes it truly skills-based, the new?
Yeah, so I think I'll probably start with a sort of open and honest response, which is when my team are organizational occupational psychologists. When we design frameworks, it's one of the things we look at is skills anyway. So we have always said that someone's suitability for a role and the demands for a role require certain knowledge, skills and behaviors, and then we can add a experience to that. You can add attitudes to that as well. And so the existing framework that we had helped develop probably 4 years ago, Ellie, something like that, the success profile for early careers, probably had skills sort of baked into it, but wasn't a skills framework as you might know it now. So what we've had to do really, in some respects, there's nothing new in the framework. It was still a complete framework. It's just the way that we structure it and the way we think about the criteria that's important. So there was also that often skills changes, transformation to skills isn't necessarily driven by talent acquisition. It's driven by other bits of the business who create skills taxonomies and skills definitions sort of separate to talent acquisition. So in this case, we worked, and Francesca in my team was really led on this. She worked in partnership with lots of stakeholders, but the head of future skills, who had defined sort of power skills. I think is still defining them. I think this is a work in progress. And often when we're doing skills aligned hiring, especially in early careers, we are dealing with emerging frameworks, emerging taxonomies. Some taxonomies are there because they're there as part of a talent marketplace, or they might be there as a kind of internal mobility skills piece. So we worked very closely to restructure and redefine the existing skills, existing competency framework. But in addition to that, to Ellie's piece, I think the emphasis so much has changed away from filling seats and putting people in roles and having present need, having satisfying present skill needs to future skills, is that we started to index much higher on things like agility of thinking, sort of around the growth mindset idea. But essentially what I mean by that is sort of people's propensity to learn, to refresh their skills, and having much less emphasis on the technical skills, though of course having good thinking skills is a really important antecedent or precursor for good technical proficiency. So we've also got the skills framework is quite soft, so there are a lot of behavioural aspects to it. So and that's really important because of what Ellie's trying to achieve with the emerging talent programs, that we really are going down the kind of what's the potential and behaviours of these people, the mindset, the motivations, and that those will be the predictors of their success. Very specifically, when we're looking to redesign, we're supporting Ellie to redesign the ASA program, which is really exciting for us. we really will be looking at that quite differently, and that's we really will redesign the tools and the exercises to align to the new framework, and really sort of thinking differently about that. I'll stop there because I think there's lots of other things I could say, but yeah, so those are sort of, that's how we go about it. There is a structured way we do all of this in spreadsheets, doing job analysis and using data from consultations, but essentially we are reshaping how and using language differently slightly to define skills.
Subtle shift, but big impact.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the shift is quite big in that we are focusing much more on future requirements. So we would traditionally have used methods where we ask people to do sort of critical incident technique, looking at current high performance, or we might look at give me an example of someone's performing well in role. We as sort of people that produce these frameworks, we can't rely on that so much with a skills-based approach. You have to think forward. And then also the other thing is that there are different types of skills and they have different levels of durability. So we have to really think we're challenging ourselves to think carefully about what's an antecedent of a skill. So what would predict someone developing a skill? What's a perishable skill? What is a durable skill? And what's a semi-durable skill? Because actually, what do you need to measure when? So we actually don't, if we measure perishable skills, by the time they come on board, they might have lost that skill. So what's the point in us assessing it early on? So we have quite a lot of complex considerations to have about what we do in terms of assessment and when as well. But that will get very nerdy, so I probably won't go down that.
Very interesting. And next another webinar. Very interesting. Make it sound simple, but yeah, you dive into that next level down.
Yeah, we are diving into trying to kind of do some sort of skills matrices might be more complicated for especially in emerging talent. Yeah,
interesting. So slightly different topic, but we'd love to hear from you on this as well. And it's been a big change for this year, one that some of the people on the call might have heard of. There's a lot of great conversation about it on LinkedIn. But Rolls-Royce, Ellie, decided this year to make all of the assessment materials public to everyone. So you can go on the website and you can see all the questions that a candidate's going to be asked throughout the process in great detail, kind of what to expect. So from your perspective, Claudia, like, why is that significant? And what sort of impact is that having on things like fairness, candidate preparedness? It's not a controversial topic, but it's definitely quite bold and does raise some questions.
Yeah, it does. And actually, it's very, in my world, we sort of try to be as research-based as possible. This is actually pretty under-researched, this area, but there is some really interesting things that we can see. So being able to prepare does definitely impact people's anxiety levels for most people, and especially the research suggests that especially neurodiverse people seem to experience lower mood before they take assessments, i.e. higher anxiety, depending on what you look at, and the ability to prepare well does help manage that. Interesting, not a lot of the evidence suggests that preparation makes people perform significantly better in these groups, across these groups. But the logic is if someone is less anxious, then they can let themselves shine through. So it slightly depends on the nature of the questions, etc. But there is some good evidence suggesting it's a positive thing to do, and there is no evidence suggesting it's a bad thing to do so far. So that's a really good sign. But logically, and what we know about people, the sentiment is really good. I think for us, our assessment processes are much about a candidate experience and really as they are about anything else. So the fact that people like it is very important for clients, including, Rolls-Royce. I would say as well, I think, Ellie, I'm right in saying that you've shared the questions, for instance, but not the probes. So there's still one of the things that people really worry about is that we won't get to see how people behave under pressure, which is very over-indexed in most selection processes anyway, because most day-to-day work is not like that. But there is an element of that could be important for certain programs. But actually, if you've got the probes, then you are eliciting genuine responses in the moment. And obviously, there's a massive concern about all of the responses being really similar. And of course, that is just a definite risk. People have got ChatGPT, they can put the questions into ChatGPT and they can come up with the same things. But if you're communicating properly to people and saying to them, we will be probing, we'll be asking you about how you to bring that to life for us, then we find we're experiencing that actually you can still get a really good index of a really good assessment of people's skill. So we definitely think for certain groups is very, very, very impactful. I think the other thing I would say, and I was thinking about this, Ellie, from a logical perspective, is that you are after innovators and thinkers. You are not after performers, and therefore there might be performance in some of what they do, and they don't need to be extrovert for many of their roles. You want considerate, deep thinkers. Giving them time to be considerate and deep in their thinking before they come to interview makes sense. And then the other thing is, what we're hearing from clients is a huge number of a huge multiple in volume of applicants, which is at complete odds to the fact that there's actually drying up talent. So what's happening is people are just taking a punt. They are just applying and applying and applying. There's no more talent in the funnel. So those numbers don't tell you you've got more talent coming in. It's just the same people doing more and more. But actually, the more you get them to prepare, the more you get them to think about what it's going to be like at the assessment and selection, the more they engage with it, you might then logically say, well, they might deselect. If they feel it's not right for them, they'll deselect. And so the opportunity we have here is to get in front of assessment, to get people to really think about whether or not they really should apply for these roles, instead of just, putting it through the sausage factory of their application forms.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it feels like there's so many pros to it. I think we were having this conversation the other day about ChatGPT and this, kind of if we were given questions for a meeting at work that we weren't, experts on the topic, and we ChatGPT'd it, we'd still fail miserably. We'd have, you have to really, like you said, be a thinker, bring your own ideas. You can't just memorize something that ChatGPT says.
No, exactly. Yeah. And ChatGPT isn't you. So as soon as you get you get probed about something, or you turn up to an actual live event, then there's something there's something else that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to leave time for questions. I have no idea how many questions have been coming in, if there are questions, but I had 2 more questions for you, Claudia. So I'll double hat them. So wanted just any advice. I know a lot of the work that your team does is also around like training recruiters. That's really important. Training assessors. So any thoughts on how to train people to actually understand and deliver a skills-based approach or mindset? And then anything else you wanted to tell us in terms of your broader work with clients, any advice while we have you that you would give other organizations that maybe are just beginning to explore this, or anything around that would be fantastic as well.
Yeah, just a couple of points really. I mean, there's a lot I could say, but so I'll just go back to what I said before about there are different types of skills. And the temptation is to look through a CV and see that that's giving you skills, but actually what you've got to think about is, are they durable, semi-durable, or perishable? So if I can code in a specific language 6 months ago, and this is perhaps less relevant to Ellie, but more generally relevant, if you don't use that coding language, it will go. In the same way that language is sort of, it depends on how competent you are, but language skills, for instance, are semi-durable. They will perish. But things like durable will be things like having great communication skills, really some of your sort of skills around critical thinking, those are more durable. So one of the things is to think about how specific you're getting when you're defining your skills, and really thinking about differentiating those and training recruiters to differentiate between those things. I think the other thing is to say, is to really think about what's the offer once people land. So if you are, and I constantly am asking this when people say we've got a skills shortage, I often say, and not just for emerging talent, we'll often say, well, when they land, what training do you give them? And if they say there is no training, then we have to look for skills in the ready skills in the market. For Ellie, that's a different proposition. So I think that's what you've got to kind of really think about when you're doing skills, when you're recruiting for skills, is what is the offer once they land? How much is this organisation going to invest in development and retention of skills? I would say in terms of techniques, recruiters will need to get better and more skilled at interviewing, especially probing, listening hard, because they also need to get people to explain their skills. They need to understand how they use them, how open they are to adapting and developing new ones. And so they have to get better really at, rather than just following a script, they have to really listen to the responses. AI is actually quite good at some of that, but not as good as the best human. There's an interesting article on LinkedIn today saying exactly that. That AI is better than a poor human, but not as good as a really good one. Yeah, and we need to challenge. We have to train recruiters to challenge hiring managers, especially if they're not compliant with the overall process, to really turn away and face away from experience and qualifications as the primary means of screening. So that would be another thing.
A lot in a similar way to how Ellie's had to go out and really show that they have to be fully bought into it and understand, fully why, so they can talk, because they are facing straight with the hiring managers or the assessors on the final day, running the wash-up sessions. So there already are challenges there. But yeah, with a totally new approach like this, another level of understanding. Brilliant. Thank you so much, both. I think hopefully, Sarah, I've left a good amount of time for some questions, if there are any.
There are a few questions, unsurprisingly. Thank you, Ellie and Claudia. So much information in such a short space of time. I expect people's heads are spinning a little bit, and so innovative and new. And we know from Stephen's work that more organisations are starting to think about this. I think you're very far ahead of the curve on it, Ellie. So huge buzz on that, and good to know there's kind of more coming down the line. I suspect people will be watching carefully when we get to the autumn season to see what happens next. Interestingly, and I'm not surprised in a sense, questions are coming from university members who are listening, because there is an impact directly on the university space. And I think, just as a general question to start with, your relationship with universities and the communication of this change of approach into the university space, how far through that are you? How is it being received? Do you have direct relationships that you're embedding this thinking within in the university area?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of, I guess, close university partnerships where we might test some of the thinking with them. I don't have like a generic comms plan for universities or for schools or anything, and I'm not going to lie, I think even if we did, we'd still miss some off and it probably wouldn't quite work, or it wouldn't quite go to the right person. For me, it's about students engaging with Rolls-Royce and understanding what I guess we're trying to achieve, and accessing the materials, the things that we share, or the events that we go to, or how we then kind of, I guess, communicate that through our people, and bring that to life. But the idea is it shouldn't feel like a systemic change for a student applying for a job. Actually, when they log on to submit their application to Rolls-Royce, they'll just see that they don't need to send in their CV, because actually we're not looking for that. Actually, what we're looking for is for them to complete 3 kind of behavioural based questions that bring to life the skills, behaviours that they're looking for. The hard work's done by me and my team in the background. So I guess it shouldn't feel like a big bang or a big, oh my gosh, we're doing something revolutionary in the marketplace. Actually, for students, hopefully they'll just see and feel better, simpler processes where they can bring to life more about about who they are. But there are guides out there. There's bits on our social media channels. There's ways that we're kind of talking about it, things that they can draw down from an access and support perspective. But yeah, hopefully it just feels like a better candidate experience for them.
Yeah, which we're not trying to put barriers up. We're trying to take them down.
Yeah.
We're trying to make it easier, more accessible. I might have missed it. You might have said are the actual eligibility criteria changing, or have they changed over a period of time for you? Or is that pretty much staying the same and you're layering on your behavioural and skills-based approach?
So no, that was probably one of the first things to change. So when I first joined, so that's probably one of my moments when they thought, who is this woman that's come into to Rolls-Royce? She's gone utterly rogue. But yeah, so no, one of the first changes we actually made a couple of years ago was to remove some of the entry requirements for our programme. So you only need to hold a degree classification now to join us on one of the programmes. For engineering graduates, you've obviously got to come from a STEM background. But again, we used to be quite prescriptive on what type of engineering degrees you might have done, or even what type of like A levels that you might have studied. We've removed the tier 1 entry requirement, so it's kind of much broader to be able to come in, and we have removed some of the technical assessments. So I remember doing a big piece of work with Claudia and team to remove things like some of the numerical testing, which again was one of those moments where you've got to really convince the engineering stakeholders. But I was saying, what are we testing in this? And I remember problem solving came back as such a massive kind of topic. I said, well, we can test problem solving in a different way. Trust me, we do not need someone to be able to do fast mental maths for us to be able to essentially test problem solving. So all of that kind of work's happened. The things that I think we're probably doing more about now is how do we really get onto the skin of some of that through our assessment process, but also through our onboarding, some of the work that we're doing around kind of coaching pre-joining, getting them to understand what their skills look like when they join. How do they understand what their skills look like as they go through different placements, or we call them gigs now, so as they kind of rotate across Rolls-Royce, and understanding how they then use their skills as kind of currency as they move through their careers.
Yeah, and I'll add to that one of the things we've done with Ellie and the team is really, again, sort of ahead really of what we're seeing in assessment now is much more of a return to more work sample assessment, simulations, things that, we know that the best predictor of a performance is to see whether or not someone can do the tasks. And what we've done, I mean, the assessment process for Rolls-Royce is not easy, right? It does get the best. It gets the best candidates now. Yeah. But what it does is it allows those people who perhaps didn't have the most successful academic career sort of result to try again and to show their skills and their potential in still a very challenging environment. But it's really just, we've really thought very hard about what is it that is needed for this future talent, and I think we brought it out, and we've worked very closely with the leads in the different business areas as well, and they've held our feet to the fire on that as well.
Lovely, thanks. I mean, a couple of the questions are in there about how can a career service help prepare its students differently, and as you said, there's a lot of information out there already. I think because we're in this sort of maybe interim phase, maybe that's not quite the right word, but there are still some employers that are being very traditional about we want a CV. In fact, we had a university careers forum earlier in the week, and we were having exactly that conversation with a couple of employers and say, is a CV needed or is it not? And if it isn't, what do career services need to know to help prep? But I think a lot of that information is there. One of the other points is around actually if there needs to be changes to, for example, sandwich placements or student modules within a university space. And that's not just a Rolls-Royce question. You said earlier, Ellie, about, it's partly about the sector and industry needs in this space. So I suspect over time that some changes do need to happen in university, but of course that takes a long time for universities to make those changes, to understand where the sector, the industry is, to have an impact on that. So I think maybe this is an ISE role in the middle of this, which is why we like to have these kind of webinars, to kind of bring all of the sides together and go, actually change is coming and you won't be the only ones to fully embed this.
Yeah, and I won't sit here and kind of, I guess, embarrass any universities, but there are some universities out there who are significantly more forward thinking than other universities who I think are very far behind the curve. So We will work with some of those more forward-thinking ones. I sit on a couple of kind of undergraduate advisory boards. They come to us, they're kind of active, I guess, in approaching us. So I would encourage universities to kind of do that and not necessarily wait for employers to come and knock on your doors. I don't see it necessarily as our role to educate the universities. You guys are thought leaders in this space, so I would really encourage you to kind of whether it be career services or kind of academics, to be looking at how you can kind of challenge and then find organizations that you can kind of work in partnership with on some of those topics.
It's not Rolls-Royce's job to do that. I completely appreciate there's an industry-wide conversation, but actually, I mean, I would say it wouldn't work, but to those universities listening, send this webinar to the people that need to see it, basically, because we get that feedback quite a bit. It's, sometimes it isn't that sort of discussion between careers teams and academics, or employers and academics, and actually, and the sort of those that are responsible for the structural direction of a university. And as you say, some get it and are making some changes, and others not quite there yet. So if you're in one of these universities, again, give them Ellie's intro to understand that, how significant employers are thinking differently about some of these things. Ellie, one maybe final question, and it's a very specific one. When you were talking about global opportunities and global mobility, it's well, the question is, are there any plans to target your China opportunities to Chinese students who are generating skills you're looking for in the UK? So I guess that, that global picture of Rolls-Royce's footprint, and how much of that you're thinking from a mobility point of view and taking students, not necessarily just in the UK, but working with them here and then moving them elsewhere.
Yeah, so we kind of talk about at the moment, do you move the work or move the people? Again, I can't give you, I guess, an answer on what that looks like. That's kind of a bigger future of work conversation that we're having. We obviously also have some really practical things, as certain work can only be done in certain countries, and certain nationalities can only work on certain things, because for those that know us, we've got quite a large defence part of our business. But I guess the simple answer is APAC is definitely a growing region for Rolls-Royce. We've obviously got presence across APAC. I can see that through some of the skills that we're bringing through. And I would encourage students from any university globally to look at what our global opportunities are. And one of the things we're exploring is around where we're bringing in new programs into new regions. How do we give everyone kind of enterprise Rolls-Royce experience? So yes, you might be a Chinese student doing an internship with us based on in our kind of China campus, but actually, how do we connect you into either the wider APAC audience, or actually into our European business? Because we don't want people to kind of be siloed into just a little bits of Rolls-Royce that they join or they experience. We want our programs to have that kind of global enterprise view, and particularly that new kind of business graduate acceleration program I was talking about. A core part of that is developing people that understand how Rolls-Royce operate, and how we simply make our money. How do we function as a business? What do we mean by our kind of investor status? What does that look like? And so it doesn't matter where you are in the world, how do we then get you better connected to be able to do that?
Yeah, and you mentioned commercial acumen in one of the kind of skills areas, and I've been around long enough to know that that's been a topic of conversation for a long time, and particularly it very much used to be part of an assessment process of, and it's difficult to assess, but you've got to kind of get that basic understanding of how a company operates, and where the stakeholders are, where the shareholders are, what's important. Read the annual report, for heaven's sake, before you go for an interview. Those kind of things. I remember those days.
And it's funny because I say it's almost like, I do say we're going back in time. So I remember going for some of my grad assessments, and they were saying, well, learn the share price. If the organisation has a share price, make sure you can go in there and say what that is that morning, and show that you've looked at where they are and what's kind of happened to it that week. Now, I'm not going to say that extreme, because I don't want someone who's just going to learn something to say it for an interview. But it's that intellectual curiosity of saying, well, you want to be a senior leader in an organisation. Have you actually read the exec summary of their annual report? Do you actually understand what a balance sheet looks like, or how the business makes money, or where kind of like income streams and revenues come from? And you should be able to do that no matter where you end up, whether it's going to be HR, commercial, finance, engineering, etc. So yeah, it's that, I call it commercial with a big C.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we would obviously have a long conversation about how you measure for that in an assessment process, because I think some of that can be taught, of course, but so there is definitely some antecedents for that curiosity. So there's some personality, massive element of personality in there, but yeah, no, it's a really interesting one. We're still writing, I think, industry
I know we've not cracked it, so don't think that we've like Claudia's given me some amazing answer, but
when you have, I might tap into some of that just for interest's sake.
I was actually looking at a spreadsheet with it in yesterday, so
fantastic. I'm very conscious of time, and this may end up just cutting us off, so I really don't want to do that before I've had a chance to say thank you, Laura, Ellie, Claudia. I'm absolutely sure that everybody listening has taken something away from that, including myself. My favourite thing is if it's not uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. So it's such a great thing to leave everybody with, Ellie. Thank you all. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we will see you again for a follow-up at some point in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.